Welcome CSP facilitators. We are here to compare changes made to Workshop 3 this year and compare them to last year's Workshop 4 agenda. We're comparing these two because we've shifted all of the content, so it is the most similar agenda we have to the new Workshop 3 agenda. At a high level, these changes involve sticking with the model lesson rather than doing Teaching Tips Live, a structure we used last year. That's the biggest change from last year's workshop. Starting off, we have our workshop opener like we always do. So in this, teachers are asked to check in on pacing and reflect on how programming was in Unit 3, specifically pair programming. And then in Workshop 2, they're asked to make a 30, 60, 90-day recruitment plan for recruiting students equitably to their computer science classroom. And we're just checking in with them on that to make sure that they have an accountability partner there and to hear some success stories and maybe inspire other people to also take up that cause. We're asking participants here to talk about programming in Unit 3 because we're talking about programming in Unit 5 and we want those memories to be fresh of mind so they can think about what went well, what would they change, and did they use pair programming, how did it go. If they didn't do it, that's fine too. We just want them to be thinking about it. Some participants may not have gotten to programming yet, and that is okay. They can still engage using their experiences from prior workshops. We've also changed the intro to Unit 5 to this previously on. This covers the main content teachers need to know in order to engage in the model lesson. So in this, there's a mixture of facilitator work and participant work. So the facilitator is going to model how to use design mode in App Lab and show them how to use event handlers. And participants are going to make sure that they can use a console log statement. This is going to be really important for the model lesson. The facilitator is going to wrap up with showing parts of Lesson 3 that talk about using multiple screens in an app. As we go on, we've replaced the TTL progression with the model lesson progression. So we've got our model lesson, it's lesson 4, and it introduces variables. In this, like we mentioned, participants will need to be able to use a console log to track what's inside a variable, and we're modeling how to teach programming equitably. Many of these strategies, and the big takeaway we want people to have is that we want people to try to keep the class together. We don't want a big spread of where people are in the lesson or across lessons. Sometimes people think teaching programming on code.org means that students are working at their own pace, and we're trying to counteract that a little bit in order to make sure every student has access to the material and putting the teacher as the provider of that structure that students need to access the material. The lesson reflection at the end also models this too. So we talk about having daily warm-up and wrap-ups as part of a routine that students do in class, using pair programming, and then hiding lessons from students at certain points. They don't need to hide every single lesson, just so a student doesn't get drastically ahead of other students in the class. Maybe if they get really excited and want to do it on the weekend, thinking about other ways to support those students who are trying to move a little faster than we would like for the whole class to have the experience of learning. The last part of this model lesson progression is the curriculum investigation. In here, we jump ahead a few lessons and participants engage in an unplugged lesson, lesson 7 on if statements. This is with the robot and will it crash activity. We do this because we want teachers to see that there are these other lessons that students can't do necessarily independently, or they would need extra resources. It's not just constant bubbles upon bubbles upon bubbles. In lesson 8, we take that unplugged and move it into a plugged in lesson because we talk a lot about teaching programming. Part of that's unplugged, but part of it is students on the computer. So we want teachers to think through, okay, how are you going to have your role change as you're teaching programming? And how are you going to structure that collaboration inside the classroom? After lunch, we come back to wrap it up. This is now called Conclusions and Connections. In this section, the facilitator talks about what content was not necessarily covered in earlier in the day, but is covered in the chapter. We also talk about how students are going to learn this content. So what is the content and how do they learn it? Again, the emphasis here is that students learn in a variety of ways. It's not all in App Lab making small changes to code. There's videos and there's map levels and there's discussion prompts and they're looking at key lessons and they're making predictions. We want to make that very clear to teachers in the workshop. We end this part with thinking about what kind of common experiences teachers want to create for their students. So thinking about where am I going to have the whole class together to talk about these things? We recommend warm-ups and wrap-ups as opportunities for that, but maybe there's some other ways too that they can create those common experiences for students. From there we go to talking about the create. So we didn't switch up the order here. You're going to see a session called Activities from the Create Survival Guide. This is formally the Digging into the Create PT, and this is coming first. So we are giving participants a chance to really dive in and understand algorithms before we give them the whole rubric. This is done to kind of make the scoring go a little bit more easily and also give participants some background knowledge so they can be successful in the scoring. We also renamed it because we wanted to focus on the idea that these activities are in the curriculum, they're in the prep unit. In the past, some teachers had thought they were just activities they did in the workshop, but they are part of the curriculum. So in this session, we start off with refreshing memories about what the create task is, and then we talk about what makes a good algorithm and how you can help students narrow down their projects. So again, very similar to last year, just moved earlier and trying to emphasize constantly that these are activities that are part of the prep unit. From there we go to scoring the example create PTs. This session is very similar to last year. They're looking at two different create PTs and applying the whole rubric to the create PTs. This is hopefully going to go a little bit more smoothly for participants now that they have some experience with algorithms. They can go ahead and apply that rubric more easily. Then we have our planning for the Create PT. This session we review connections that are already in Unit 5, Chapter 1. So participants aren't thinking they need to recreate a lot of things, seeing what's already there, and also directing them back to that Create PT Prep unit where they found the survival guide. So again, bringing it back to there's some stuff there. You don't need to invent everything. Use what's there and think about what else you're going to use to help your students be successful on this. We give teachers a set amount of time where they can think about those questions themselves in this community that you have created. Of course, we end every workshop with our wrap-up, where we clear out the question parking lot and take the survey for the workshop. As always, remember to take your facilitator survey as well at the end of the workshop. That's very important feedback for us. It's actually what caused a lot of our changes we made to this agenda and every agenda. So we want to hear if we're going in the right direction or what other suggestions you have, since you're on the ground making these workshops really powerful for teachers.